In Band of Brothers, Tech Sergeant Don Malarkey encounters a German POW who he discovers is from Oregon like him. Just after Malarkey parts ways with the prisoner, Lieutenant Ronald Speirs executes him, leaving Malarkey in shock. But is this scene based on a real-life event? And if so, did it unfold how the series portrays it? In Episode 2 of Band of Brothers, titled Day of Days, Easy Company has landed in Normandy on D-Day, and several members of the company are moving along a road toward a rallying point at the hamlet of Le Grand Chemin, where they will regroup before carrying out the Brecourt Manor assault. Along the way, Don Malarkey and several other members of Easy Company are passing a group of German prisoners of war. Malarkey jokingly greets the group. "Top of the morning to you fellas, enjoying the war," he says in his best Irish accent. He then leans in toward one of the prisoners. "Where are you from, son?" he jokingly asks. As he turns to walk away, the prisoner answers, "Eugene, Oregon." The response stops Malarkey in his tracks. "Eugene? You gotta be kidding me," says Malarkey. "I'm from Astoria." Malarkey then approaches the prisoner and they begin to talk. The prisoner informs Malarkey that he is part of the Volksdeutsche. "My family answered the call. All true Aryans should return to the fatherland," he says. The term Volksdeutsche refers to people who were ethnically German but did not hold German citizenship. Nazi Germany considered these individuals to be part of the German folk or national community. In fact, the word Volksdeutsche combines the word Volk, meaning people or folk, and Deutsche, meaning Germans. The prisoner then tells Malarkey that he joined up to fight for Germany in 1941. He says that he was born in Eugene, Oregon, and that in 1939, he was working practically the same job as Malarkey in a similar factory about 100 miles from the factory where Malarkey worked. Malarkey states that the factory he had worked in, where he tooled propeller shafts, was called Monarch. As Malarkey gets up to part ways with the captured German soldier, he tells him, "I'll see you around." "Yeah, see you around," responds the soldier. Moments later, we see Lieutenant Ronald Speirs approach the group of German POWs. He passes out cigarettes to them in what seems to be an act of kindness. The scene then cuts back to Malarkey, who is down the road a bit and is stunned when he hears Speirs executing the group of POWs with his Thompson submachine gun. While the scene between Malarkey and the German POW from Oregon was inspired by real life, it was significantly altered for Band of Brothers, especially the conclusion of the scene. Don Malarkey recalled the real-life story of the encounter in his book, Easy Company Soldier. The encounter happened on the morning of D-Day as they were walking along a road about a mile inland that paralleled Normandy's coastline. Just after the sun started to come up, they encountered about 20 German prisoners who were being held just off the road. In reality, it wasn't Don Malarkey who asked where they were from. In his book, he said that some wise guy in our company asked them, "Where the hell are you guys from? Brooklyn?" The series falsely depicts Malarkey as being that wise guy. It was then that a German master sergeant just off Malarkey's shoulder responded, "No, Portland, Oregon." Malarkey said that he couldn't believe that the guy spoke perfect English and was from Portland. Malarkey said that for reasons beyond him, he can't understand why Band of Brothers changed it and showed him saying he was from Eugene. One possibility might have been to avoid confusion with the other Portland, Portland, Maine, but that's only speculation. "No kidding. Portland?" Malarkey responded eagerly. "I'm from Astoria." Malarkey said he was amazed at the coincidence. "I worked in Portland until 1938, said the German soldier, and came home when Hitler called all loyal Germans to return to the fatherland. Malarkey then asked him where he worked in Portland. "Schmidt Steel Company," the prisoner answered. "You gotta be kidding," said Malarkey. "The owners of that company were friends of my family, and I worked for Monarch Forge and Machine Works right across the street." It's fairly clear that the filmmakers figured that it would be too hard for audiences to believe the true story that these two men had worked at plants right across the street from one another, even if it was at different times in real life. Instead, the series changes it and has them having worked 100 miles from one another at the same time. Both companies did the same thing, Malarkey noted in an interview. They were making parts for Liberty ships and stuff like that. Liberty ships were a class of cargo ship that supplied the Allied forces during the war. Before departing from talking with the prisoner in real life, Malarkey asked him, "Well now, what do you think about that decision now to return to your homeland?" "I think I made a big mistake," the prisoner answered. Malarkey said that it was then that Bill Garnier called to him, "Malark, let's go," clearly upset that he was fraternizing with the enemy. In his book, he summed up the encounter by saying, "I'd only been at war a few hours, and already I was learning stuff I hadn't been taught in training, namely, that the guy trying to kill you and that you're trying to kill could be somebody who once worked in an American defense plant across the street from where you later worked. Strange thing, war." Up until this point, the minor changes that Band of Brothers makes to Malarkey's encounter with the POW are mostly forgivable, if not understandable. However, what follows in this series after Malarkey walks away is where Band of Brothers goes off the rails with regard to historical accuracy. In order to introduce the audience to Lieutenant Ronald Speirs and establish him as a fearsome killer, the series shows him handing out cigarettes to the group of POWs before executing them. In his book, Malarkey's recollection of the German-American prisoner from Oregon ends with him telling the man, "You take care," before walking on. Ronald Speirs never came along and passed out cigarettes to these prisoners and then executed them. This is Hollywood fiction. Malarkey emphasized the scene's historical inaccuracy during a 2012 talk he gave in Salem, Oregon. In the series, they show me leaving, and they show a lieutenant from D Company walking up to these guys and giving them a cigarette, and then walking back across the road and turning around and gunning them down, said Malarkey. I don't know that that happened right there. I know it happened later, attacking Carentan, France. The guy that they were portraying there was Lieutenant Ronald Speirs, who became E Company commander at Bastogne, Belgium, later on. But he was a pretty tough nut, and he did some pretty tough stuff. I don't know that he really shot these guys down. But later on, as we were attacking Carentan, France, E Company was on the outskirts of Carentan. We'd crossed the Douve River Straits, and as we were on the edge of Carentan, behind us was D Company, and all of a sudden, we could hear a bunch of Tommy gun firing going on. And we yelled back through the ranks what was going on, because we had just passed through there. And when the report came back, he said that they told the story about Ronald Speirs having these Germans that came up out of the ditches and surrendered. And then he did what they claim he did on D-Day, but it probably happened at our attack on Carentan, France. If the German-American POW Malarkey encountered wasn't in fact executed on D-Day, which there's no real-life evidence to support that he was, this begs the questions. Did he survive the war as a POW, and what became of this man after World War II? And did Don Malarkey ever try to track him down? In interviews, Don Malarkey expressed hope that the man had survived the war. However, I could find no evidence that he ever tried to locate the man, especially since not having a name would have made the task very difficult, if not impossible, especially if the soldier had remained in Germany after the war was over. Upon learning the true story, I suppose it's comforting to know that the German-American POW from Oregon, whom Malarkey shared a friendly conversation with, wasn't actually executed on D-Day. Perhaps like Don Malarkey, he survived the war and had the chance to restart his life. Perhaps like Malarkey, he went back to school and found a career. And maybe like Malarkey, he met a girl who he fell in love with, who would become his wife and would always stay by his side, including when the echoes of war became too loud to bear. Perhaps like Malarkey, he had children and one day grandchildren who he would lift high in the air as he silently prayed that they would never know war. If you want to learn more about Tech Sergeant Don Malarkey, including his struggles with PTSD after the war, check out the video linked on the screen. If you enjoyed this video and want to follow all of our Band of Brothers content, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Anchors away, my friends.